start off with chapter 1. Here are the things we will learn, or the objectives we will have for our chapter 1. First, we're going to define statistics and statistical thinking. Then we will explain the process of statistics. So you are not going to have to repeat that back for me, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what it's all about. Talk about quantitative and qualitative variables, and then discrete and continuous variables. Then we will take a look at levels of measurement. So this is what we are doing for chapter 1. So it is, there's really no math to be done at all. It is very vocabulary heavy because probability and statistics class is kind of like learning a new language. There's all new vocabulary. It's a whole lot of fun, but there's a lot of new words. So excuse me if I bore you just a little bit with all of this new vocabulary, but it is what it is. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about what statistics is or are. It is a science, and a lot of times statistics are the practice of statistics is used for design experiments that could be even in like a science fair or something like that, because it is a science and there is kind of a scientific method going along with it. So it is a science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing information. You take that information that you have and you draw conclusions or answer whatever question. We always start with a question and then we'll finish off with how do we answer that question. So we also provide measure of confidence for our conclusions, which we aren't going to be doing that until closer to the end. So data is what we are collecting, data or data. I use both words. That it is what the information is that we are collecting. And the word data or data, it is actually a plural, because data is a group of a whole bunch of different numbers that we've collected. So it is actually plural, but I don't get caught up in the semantics of that because it's really weird to say data are instead of data is. So yeah, I'll probably go back and forth on that. So we use the data that we collect, we use it to draw our conclusion, we use it to crunch our numbers, to do the math with it. It can be numerical or it could be non-numerical. So it would like describe characteristics like colors of an M&M's in a bag, or are you right-handed or left-handed? What color is your hair? What color are your eyes? Things like that. That would be non-numerical, or gender. So we are going to take a look at different anecdotal claims. We're going to be proving points. We're going to be taking a look on whether or not the data is used correctly. So this is what we're doing in this course. Right, so first, some very important vocabulary words. So we're going to start with population. So population is the entire group that we are studying. So for example, if we're going to be presenting a study about RCC students, we're trying to figure out if the amount of time studying relates to the grade that they received in class, then our population would be all RCC students. So even though we probably aren't going to talk to every single RCC student, the population, the group that we are studying, is those RCC students. So that would be our population. So it's the entire group. Entire is important here. Right, so our sample is a subset of that population. So it is the number of people we actually talk to or poll or whatever. So when we take a group out of that, usually we take them randomly, take a random group out of that population, that would be our sample. So for example, if we selected 50 RCC students and we used their study hours and grades for our study, those 50 students would be our sample. They're part of the greater population, but those would be our sample. Lastly, we have individual. So individual is one of the people or one of the objects that is part of that population. So if our population is the entire the entire student body, it's all RCC students, an individual would be one RCC student. So there we go. So this is a this is an example I like to use this in class. Generally, when we're in class, what I'll do is I will give everybody a Post-it note and they will write their answer on it, and then I would collect them all and I would figure out how many people answered a certain way. So I'm going to be hypothetical here. So you're walking down the street, you notice the person walking in front of you drops $100. Nobody else notices except you. If you kept the money, nobody would know that you kept the money, that you have that money. Nobody would know. Would you keep the money or would you return it to the owner? So normally I would have everybody write their answer on a Post-it note, and I would collect those Post-it notes so it would be anonymous. And usually in a class of about 30 people, I would have 28 of them would say that they would give the money back. That's usually about the number. So I'm going to say, pretend we have 30 people in class. I'm going to say that 28 out of 30 people would return the money to the owner. Therefore, we are saying that 93.3% of our class would return the money to the owner. So I'm pretending that out of our 30 students, that 28 of them would return the money. That's usually pretty representative of what I get. In fact, in high school, it's smaller. I do teach high school students. That's my day job. No, it's summer right now, but that's my day job. But they still, it's usually a smaller number that would return the money. Maybe it's a maturity thing. So a statistic, it's a numerical summary of a sample. So our class would be a sample of RCC students. So this is a numerical summary of our sample of RCC students. So the way that I remember that statistic goes with sample is statistic starts with an S. Descriptive statistics. So if I if I took this data and I put it in a numerical summary, which is like above, or if I put it in a table, or if I put it in a graph, I am describing that data through pictures. So descriptive statistics is describing that data through a numerical summary or a table or graph or in some organized fashion. So this part right here is saying 93.3% of our class will return the money. That is being descriptive about it. That's a way of displaying it. If I put it in a nice pretty graph of some sort, those are descriptive statistics. So feel free to pause the video, of course, if you want to write down any notes. Hopefully you printed out the PowerPoint, and so you're just writing directly on the PowerPoint. So we described the results without drawing any conclusions, so this is descriptive statistics. It is just descriptive statistics until I draw conclusions. As soon as I draw conclusions, then we are moving on. All right. So once again, 28 out of 30 of our students, and that's 93.3% of our class will return the money. So inferential statistics. So if I took our sample class and I used that to extend it to the entire population. So I say, therefore, about 93.3% of all RCC students would return the money to the owner. This is called inferential statistics because I'm making inferences and I'm applying it to the entire population. So I would have to have a level of confidence. You've seen this in elections where they're doing polls and they say 93 plus or minus 2%. So if I'd say so between 91% and 95% of all RCC students would return the money. So 91.3 and 95.3. So I went 2 down and 2 up. So if I say between 91.3% and 95.3% of all RCC students would return the money, I am inferring something based on my sample. I am applying it to the population. And I'm saying with 95% accuracy that between those two values of RCC students would return the money. Now there's a whole lot more that goes into this about how I would have to run this experiment, but this is just basic. This is our first lesson, so we're definitely not going to go deeply into that. So suppose the percentage of all students on your campus who have a job is 84.9%. This is a parameter because it is a numerical summary of the population. So if I'm making a numerical summary, let's say I took whatever data the RCC has about our students, and I find that 84.9% of all students, I was able to poll everybody or have everybody's information, 84.9% of them have jobs. So this is called a parameter because it represents a population. I always remember statistics are samples and parameters are population. If you can remember those alliterations or remember that mnemonic device, that can help you. That's how I had to do it until I finally just had it memorized. So until you just have it memorized, try to remember that in your head. So we took a sample of 250 students. From the sample, we found that 86.4% have jobs. This is a statistic because it is based on a sample. See the difference there? So populations or parameters are based on population, statistics are based on sample. So this is basically what I would write in your notes. This is the Reader's Digest condensed version. Sorry, I covered that up. So this is the part that you're going to put in your notes because you're going to have questions like this on the homework, and you possibly will on a quiz or a test or something. So this is what you're looking for. All right, let's move on. Okay, the goal of inferential statistics is to estimate the parameter. So if I don't know the information about the population, I use inferential statistics to estimate the population. So I use it to estimate the parameter. So most of the time it doesn't make sense to poll the entire population. Like, can you imagine trying to poll the entire population of the US? They try to do that with censuses, and that doesn't work. People resist giving answers to the census takers. So even there, it's practically impossible. So using samples is all we can do a lot of the times. All right, let's move on. Great job so far. So here's our process of statistics. You are not going to be required to remember this. This isn't something you need to recall at a later date. This is just kind of breaks it down and tells you how we work through things and what our process is when it comes to statistics. So first thing you want to do is identify your research objective. You need to come up with your question. You're not going to start collecting data until you have a question that you're trying to answer with it. So basically you figure out, what do I want to answer? Who is the population I'm dealing with? So thinking back on the job thing. So my question would be, what percent of RCC students hold a job? So that is maybe holds a full-time job. I don't know. So we need to figure out, what question do we want to answer? Once we have a question, we know what questions to ask people, and we know who to ask, and then we can start collecting our data. So once you have your question, you start collecting your data. Most of the time, as I said before, you can't question an entire population. So usually we'll take a sample, and I will show you later on how we decide what our sample size would be. And we have to collect it correctly. We're not going to go deeply into how to collect data correctly, because this is just an intro statistics and probability class. Since this is just an introduction, we're not going to go in too deeply on how to collect a proper sample. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over it, and we're just going to go super basic on that. Your textbook does go a little bit deeper into it, so if you want to see more about that, feel free to go into your textbook and take a look at it. So one thing I do want to point out, though, is this right here. So a lot of times studies are based on convenience samples. So you've probably seen polls on like news websites, or there's also phone-in polls. So these are not reliable because, well, think about it. So a convenient sample. So if I asked a question, do you think Joe Biden is doing a good job as president so far? Okay. So if I ask that question on Fox News, I'm going to get very different answers than if I asked it on, I don't know, MSNBC or CNN. So it really depends on where you ask it. Or what if I asked it the question on Facebook as opposed to Truth Social, which is Donald Trump's social media site? I'm going to get very different answers. So convenience samples, basically, you're just talking to whoever is readily available, and you're not going to get an accurate reading on that. It's not going to be completely accurate. It's not a reliable sampling method. And phone-in polls, you'd think that a phone-in poll would be pretty reliable, but basically you're getting people who generally feel strongly about it. So if you see a phone-in poll on TV and it says something like, call this number to vote for name brand ketchup or Walmart brand ketchup, you're not going to call in unless you have some really strong feelings about ketchup. You are not going to call in. Most people are not. Maybe a few bored people, but most people are not going to call in. So usually it's going to be the people who have some super strong feelings about it. So that's why phone-in polls are not reliable. So next we're going to describe the data. So we are not going to do a whole lot of math with it here, but we are basically just doing super basic, like organizing our data. Sometimes we'll put it in a graph, or we can put it in a table or something like that. But basically this is just an overview. This is still not drawing any inferences. It's still not making any predictions or anything. It is just basically saying, here's what my data looks like. Here it is organized just a little bit. And so then I can decide what kind of statistical methods do I want to use in order to crunch the numbers here. I apologize if you can hear my dog drinking water in the back. Number 4, now is when you start using your math. Now is when you're going to start using the techniques that you're going to learn in this class to figure out how those results can answer your question. So now is when you do that, and now is when you figure out the level of reliability, you figure out any margins of error, all of this stuff. You do crunch all the numbers and do all of the math, do everything required to now answer that question. So I am not writing down the conclusion yet. I'm just doing all of that math. I'm doing all of those techniques and trying to see if there's any other techniques I need, and trying to get everything, basically trying to answer the question. Last is, and it's not on here, so number 5 would be to write your conclusion or to communicate your conclusion in some way. But that, I guess that kind of goes with number 4, but basically number 5 is you're kind of you're writing down your conclusion in a way that the reader can understand. All right, so that was the process. I am not going to require you to reiterate this to me. I don't believe there's any questions in the homework that are going to require you to do that, but this is just the basics. So we are going to break this down, and so you can see each piece in a real study. So this is a batterer treatment program. So so we're going to figure out if a batterer treatment program is better compared to non-therapeutic treatments such as community service. So we took 376, or these researchers did. They took 376 male criminals who are criminal court defendants. They were accused of assaulting their intimate female partners, so wife, girlfriend, something like that. They were randomly assigned. Half of them went to a 40-hour batterer treatment program, so they went to a specific program to help reform batterers. And then the other half did 40 hours of community service. After 6 months, it was reported that 21% of the males in the control group, those who did the community service, had further battering incidents. Only 10% of the males in the treatment program had further battering incidents. So the researchers concluded, based on this study, that the treatment was effective in reducing repeat batterer offenses. So let's take a look at how this study, how it fits into each piece of our, what we just saw, the the process of statistics. So first, we're going to identify our research objective. We're going to look for what question are we trying to answer. Okay, sorry. I don't know what that was. So the first thing we're going to do, the identifying the research objective, we were determining whether males accused of battering their intimate female partners, whether those who were in the treatment program are less likely to batter again compared to those in community service. So it could just come down to a question saying, question could be, do batterer treatment programs work better than community service at reforming batterers? Something like that. Okay, next. We have number 2, collect the information. So here's where we gather our data. So in this case, our data was we took 2 different groups. We had 376 people who were accused of battering their intimate female partner. We took 2 different groups. We had a control group that did 40 hours of community service, and we had our treatment group, which were in the batterer treatment program. They were randomly assigned into both of those different groups. 6 months after the program ended, we determined the percentage of males that battered their partners again. This is the information. We're not doing anything with the information yet. This is just our gathering of the information. Next. Now we're going to describe the data. We're just organizing it. We're not applying it to anything yet. All we're doing is organizing it. So here is what we determined. After 6 months of treatment, 21% of the males in the control group battered again, 10% in the treatment group battered again. So we haven't done anything with the data other than saying, this is what we observed after 6 months. That's all that happens with the describing the data, organizing and summarizing. So basically we probably had pages and pages and pages of notes and data and all of that, and all we did was put this in this succinct little paragraph. Number 4, drawing our conclusions. Here we go. We extend the results of 376 males in the study to all males who batter their intimate female partner. That is, males who batter their female partner and participate in a batter treatment program are less likely to batter again. So most likely, this particular study would bring up more questions. This is why science is never done. You don't just stop and say, okay, here we go. Everybody goes in the batter treatment programs. Everybody's better. No, we always continue to study these things. This is almost always we will just continue to study and continue to do these different, we'll continue to research the same things in different ways in order to see if we can replicate things. But this was a really great research, and it actually says, okay, so maybe we can present this to somebody to get more funding for these batter treatment programs. There's all sorts of things they can do with this data. All right. I'll always do that. I always go off on these tangents. Sorry about that. Anyway, why don't we continue? So, going to need a little bit more vocabulary here. So, moving on to the next step. This is the second piece where we're going to look at quantitative and qualitative. But first, we need to know what a variable is. Yes, you know what a variable is. You've taken algebra. If I asked you what a variable was, you would say it's the x or the y in the y equals mx plus b. However, within statistics, a variable is whatever the characteristics are that we are studying of the individual. So our variable could be right or left-handed, could be color of eyes, it could be number of children you have, it could be how many times do you tell your dog to stop licking his paw during the day. Yes, my dog's right over there licking his paw right now. It could be whatever you are studying, that is, in whatever the characteristics of that individual, that is your variable. So, key point here, variables vary. So if everyone had all the same height, plants all grew exactly the same, we wouldn't need to look at more than one to know. So variables vary. Quantitative or qualitative or categorical. So qualitative or categorical, I generally say categorical, but qualitative is what our textbook likes to use. Both of them are equally correct. So qualitative, think qualities. Qualities, we're looking at qualities of people. Categorical, categories. So this is based on some attribute or characteristic. This is generally non-numerical, but sometimes it is something numerical if the numbers like don't make sense to do math with. So for example, phone numbers would be qualitative only because you don't do math with phone numbers. So here's some examples: gender, zip code, hair color, birth date. These are not normally things we do math with, and so these are qualitative. Quantitative data. So these are numerical things. These are generally things we do math with. If I add them or subtract them, the results are still meaningful, because I'm not going to say, oh, my zip code is 3 more than your zip code. Just doesn't make any sense. So generally quantitative, think quantity. They are things that are measurable. They are things that can be added or subtracted. They still make sense. So temperature, number of days a student has studied, height, weight, amount of money you have, number of hours you spend watching TV, things like that. Anything that it makes sense to do a little bit of math with it. These are qualitative and quantitative. So we're going to go through a few examples and hopefully help cement this into your brain. So this Elizabeth Kavavic and others, they studied the factors that affect the eating habits of adults in their mid-30s, and these are the different things. So we're going to classify them as qualitative or quantitative. So nationality, it's generally just words and it doesn't make sense to add them or subtract them, so that would be qualitative. Number of children somebody has. So I have two more children than somebody else. So clearly doing math with it makes sense, so that would be quantitative. Household income in a previous year. Money, hey, I made $1,000 more this year than last year. Okay, I added, that is quantitative. Level of education. So this one is tricky. So level of education. So if I say I have a bachelor's degree, clearly, which I do, or if I say I have a master's degree, which I do, that is qualitative. But if I say I'm in the 2nd grade, I could say, oh, I'm 1 grade higher than I was last year. That's kind of quantitative, but generally we just say qualitative. So it depends on the context you're using it. If you were using it in the sense that you would be looking at numbers like how many years has it been since you were in 4th grade, now that could be quantitative. So it really kind of depends on the context or how you're using it. So daily intake of whole grains. So we talk about how many grams per day we've eaten in whole grains. That would be quantitative. Hopefully all that makes sense. If you have any questions, make sure you send me a message, or posting it in the forums is a great idea because then everybody can see your question. All right, let's move on. Discrete and continuous. So discrete variables, they are quantitative variables. So both discrete and continuous are quantitative. So these ones have a finite number of possible values, or they're countable. So these are things that if I was to graph them, they would be dots on a graph. So if I had a graph, let me do my beautiful graph here, they would be dots on a graph. Like, for example, I have 4 children. I didn't have 3.75 children before I had 4 children. I had 1 child, then 2 children, then 3 children, then 4 children. They're countable things. So those countable things, and it doesn't necessarily need to be whole numbers. Let's say I was selling t-shirts out in front of a concert, and I was selling those t-shirts for $5.50 each. I am never going to have $8. I'm going to have $5.50, then I'm going to have $11, and then I'm going to have $16.50. So I'm never going to have $8. I'm not going to have, $4.35. So this would be something that would be discrete. If I was graphing the amount of money I had, it would be dots on a graph. So it can't take every value between 2 possible values. Some examples: number of students in class, how many TVs sold last week, number of red marbles in a jar, Yeah, how many kids you have, how many pets you have, how many times a week do you mow your lawn, things like that. Continuous variables, they have an infinite number of possible values. They're not countable. So they can take on every possible value. If I was going to graph it, once again, here's my lovely graph, I would not lift my pencil when I graphed it. That's a beautiful graph because it can take on every possible value. So, for example, it takes me 30 minutes to get to work every day, but I have to be driving for 29 minutes and 36 seconds before I can hit 30 minutes. I have to be driving for every minute in between. I don't drive 1 minute and then jump to 2 minutes. I drive 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 second, 1 minute, 2 seconds. So it takes on every value in between before it hits the next minute. So it would be a continuous line. I would not lift my pencil when I am graphing it. So it may take every possible value between any two possible values. So here's some example. Height of students in class. As you are growing, you take on every possible value. You don't hit 6 feet tall unless you were 5 feet 11 and 3/4 inches. The time it takes to get to school. I just talked about that one. Distance traveled, weight of a baby, all of that. So anything that grows in a continuous fashion or moves in a continuous fashion, those would be our continuous. I hope that made sense. Once again, if you have questions, make sure you post them in the forums or send me a message. I'm happy to help. So quantitative variables, those are the discrete and continuous. Qualitative are just off here by themselves. Clearly, red hair cannot be continuous or discrete, so it just kind of lives off by itself. See, we're almost done with this. There's just 3 more slides. So here's some, once again, we're taking a look at Elizabeth Kavavic and looking at the factors that affect the eating habits of adults in their mid-30s. So we're going to classify these as discrete or continuous. These are all quantitative. The number of children somebody has. So once again, I am not going to have 1 3/4 children. So that would be discrete because I can count the number of children I have. Household income in the previous year. So this is continuous. Some people would argue because you're not going to have a partial cent that this would be discrete, but it still takes every possible value. I can't earn $100 unless I earned $99.99 before. And yes, technically they round it to the nearest 15 minutes and all of that, but it's continuous. Daily intake of whole grains. So this is a little bit tricky because, I mean, I've gone back and forth on this one. I've had people argue that it could be that it is discrete because you can count the number of grains, but it's continuous because, you can eat a partial gram. It's really, really small. Even though we round to the nearest gram when we are measuring, it's continuous. Because I have to eat 3 3/4 grams before I can eat 4 grams. All right, hopefully if you have questions, send me a message once again. Levels of measurement. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second. This is not something, so basically, I'm going to tell you how I remember these things, and I remember them. You might want to have this notes and put ways to look at it and ways to look it up when you are, what was I going to say? So these can be kind of confusing. So I'm going to tell you what to look for in each one. And yes, there will be questions on the test, and yes, there will be questions on your homework. And I don't know if we have a quiz this week or not, but there will be a question on the first test on this. But it's not a ton of points, but they will be there. So let me talk about the different levels of measurement, and I will help you to see what to look for. All right, so yes, on test. When things are important, and I think you should write them down, I want to make sure to tell you if it's going to be on a test, and I try to tell you when things aren't going to be on a test or a quiz. All right, first thing. So the nominal level of measurement. So this is quantitative or qualitative, categorical. This is the first two levels of measurement are going to be categorical. So the first two are categorical. So these are categorical variables that do not have a specific order. They're not ordered at all. Like, for example, if I was looking at the colors in the colors of M&Ms in a bag of M&Ms, there's not a specific order they're put in. You just say, I have this many red, I have this many blue, I have this many green. They're just colors of M&Ms. They're categorical variables. This is green, this is blue, this is red, whatever. They're not specific orders. Talking about right-handed or left-handed, there's not a specific order. Talking about the color of hair, it's not a specific order. So things like that, if there's not a specific order, this is just nominal. So gender, handedness, religion, favorite color, these are things that don't have a specific order. They're just, you can just make a list, and it's not going to look weird if it's in a different order. So ordinal is similar to nominal. These are, once again, they're both categorical. They're both categorical. And so it's similar to the nominal level, except for they are ranked in a specific order. So if it would look weird if you put them in a different order, then it's probably ordinal. So, for example, let's see here, letter grades. Letter grades go A, B, C, D, and F. If I put the letter grades as B, F, D, C, A, that's going to look really strange. If they look strange being in a different order, then it's probably ordinal. Satisfaction, so this is like saying, you know, those things that you have like highly dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, neutral, somewhat satisfied, highly satisfied, those types of things, that's what that means. Those have a specific order. Same things with happiness. I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm kind of okay, I'm kind of happy, I'm super happy, I'm ecstatic, whatever. So those could be in order. I mean, it really kind of depends. That one, that's kind of a weak example, but you kind of get an idea there. So, so things that have to have a specific order, but they're still categorical. The things that are ordered, like for example, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree. That's the way the degrees go. Then doctorate. That's the way the degrees go. It is still categorical, but they go in that order. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They have a specific order, even though they're still categorical. Okay, these last two are the ones that are quantitative. So let's take a look at those. So the interval level of measurement, so this is quantitative. So these are quantitative. So here, this is important. A value of 0 doesn't mean the absence of quantity. So you need to look at, what does 0 mean with this variable? If I say that this variable is 0, doesn't mean that there aren't any, the absence of quantity. Also, the math you would do with this is addition and subtraction. Most of the time with these variables, multiplication and division do not make sense, but addition and subtraction do. Let me give you some examples. Elevation. A 0 elevation doesn't mean that there's no elevation at all. It doesn't mean there's no elevation. It just means you are at sea level, because you can have a negative elevation where you're below sea level. And same thing, think about the math. I'm not going to say that, oh, the elevation of that mountain is twice as high as the elevation of the other mountain. Just doesn't really make sense. Same thing with temperature. It's twice as hot yesterday as it is today. That doesn't make any sense. Plus 0 is just a temperature. You can have sub-zero temperatures. Calendar years are kind of weird, because you have your common era, you have your today, and then you have your before common era, you have your BCEs. But still, as we didn't have a 0 calendar year, but if we did, it wouldn't mean the absence of value. It just means that we're going for the common error. So think about this. So those are the things you ask yourself. Does 0 mean there's nothing there? And would it make sense? Uh-oh. Why does it keep doing that? Hello? Would it make sense to multiply? Let's take a look at ratio level of measurement. This is the last one. Remember, these are quantitative. So ratio level, 0 means absence of quantity. So with ratio, if something is 0, it means that there's nothing there. And the math that you would use would be multiplication and division. Yeah, you can use addition and subtraction also, but you can also use multiplication and division and it'll make sense. So remember, think about the 0. 0 means absence of quantity, and multiplication and division makes sense. Here's some examples. Money in your pocket. If I have 0 money in my pocket, I have no money. I can have twice as much money in my pocket as that person over there. If I have $10, they have $5. Height in feet and inches. Now this is kind of a weird one because a 0 height would mean nothing's there. And I mean, I don't think about this as much about people, but think about like the height of a 2x4. If I have a 5-foot 2x4 and that person has a 10-foot 2x4, their 2x4 is twice as tall as mine. Weight in kilograms. 0 would mean no weight, means there's nothing there. You can have something that's twice as heavy as something else. Time spent watching TV. If I spend 0 time watching TV, then I didn't watch TV. It means absence of value. I can watch TV 3 times as much as you, or half of you. So think about that. Think about the 0. 0 means absence of quantity. 0 means there's nothing there. And multiplication and division makes sense. So make sure that you have these notes down because this will be on the test. It's not a ton of points. It's not going to sink you if you get it wrong, but make sure that you have this. I think that was it. Oh, no, we're going to do a little couple examples here and then we will be done. So first, gender. So gender is the nominal level of measurement because it doesn't necessarily have an order, and it is qualitative. So gender is nominal. Temperature. So temperature, think about 0. 0 is not an absence of value. So since 0 is not an absence of value, this is an interval level because there's no absence of value on 0. Number of days a college student studied this week. So 0 means absence of value. If a college student studied 0 hours, they didn't study. That's ratio. Finally, letter grade earned in stats class. As I said before, A, B, C, D, and F. Those are letter grades. There's a certain order they come in, so that is ordinal. Hope all that made sense. Make sure you ask questions if you have them. That is the end of Chapter 1. You are ready to do the Chapter 1 homework. Make sure you get that in right away because we need that for attendance this first week. Thank you so much. Send me a message. Put a post in the discussion forum if you have questions. Have a great day.